What's going on, everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jason and this is Bonafide XP. I'm actually a video editor and motion graphic artist by trade. I've been in the field for 18 years, and when I have downtime, one of my favorite things to do is game. This first video is dedicated to outlining my favorite games from 2024. So I figured since I'm new to the scene in this regard, it made sense to highlight the kind of games that I'm into. This way you have an idea of some games we might have in common. So let's get into it. Up first is Stalker 2. I love me a good first-person shooter, and this game has all the elements I look for in spades. An immersive sandbox with a narrative strong enough to keep me motivated, plenty of choice in how I choose to go about the missions, interesting enemy variety, lots of guns, and a little bit of weird. In all honesty, this game would have ranked higher on the list for me if it wasn't riddled with so many bugs on launch. Thankfully, Stalker 2 developer GSC Game World has been amazing at updating the game and improving its performance since launch, and it's rapidly becoming the game I was hoping it would be.
Become a legend. Become a Helldiver.
Okay, next up we have to talk about Helldivers 2. While I love me a good shooter, third-person shooters always take preference to me, and Helldivers 2 was a sleeper hit when it came out. Narratively, I love the tongue-in-cheek democracy theme. It immediately lets you know it's not taking itself too seriously. I think the Starship Troopers vibe works even now, and you can see it by how many gamers are still playing it today. If Sony didn't try to implement that account linking policy during its peak, I think Helldivers 2 would have had the momentum to make a strong case for Game of the Year last year. Where the game really shines is clearly in the gameplay. I used to have fun with the Earth Defense Force games back in the day with friends, mindlessly destroying bugs with rocket launchers, machine guns, etc. And Helldivers 2 improves upon that in every single way. I haven't played a game that has compelled me so strongly to call up some friends and jump into some matches like Helldivers 2 has. Squatting up feels smooth, and working together to eradicate bugs with the various weapon types and deployment weaponry like airstrikes is extremely satisfying, as long as you don't get caught in the blast, and even so, it's always good for a laugh. Okay, so I had to put Astrobot at the 8th spot because it's laced so well with nostalgia. Recalling memories of my youth playing Mario Brothers and platformers alike, it had to be placed on the list, but not quite higher than the ones to come for various reasons. Astrobot is as close as you can get to gaming perfection in my opinion. It nails so many things extremely well, especially the fun factor. There are new systems it introduces to you that are easy to pick up on, yet changes slightly how you play enough to pique your interest. It is truly peak platforming at its best. It's not too easy and it's not too hard. And the levels that are pretty hard compel you to keep trying until you knock it out. The visuals in this game are a marvel, man, and you can tell Sony really pushed the limits of the PS5 making this game, and it shows. The incorporation of Sony's first-party titles like God of War and Uncharted really shine in this game. I think Sony finally found their mascot in Astrobot. Overall, you have top-notch visuals, performance is flawless, gameplay is engaging with awesome replay value, and it makes you laugh while you play, which is just icing on the cake. It received Game of the Year at the Game Awards for a reason, and while not my personal pick for Game of the Year, it's worthy enough to be a part of the conversation.
Your malignant energies are useless!
Bring him down.
Number 7 on my list is going to Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. This game gives me all the vibes I felt during the Xbox 360 days of playing Gears of War with friends, or solo blasting through the campaign on the hardest difficulties. We have some strong characters here sent into war to save the day, and they're building camaraderie while questioning loyalties and what they're fighting for. A fairly simple premise, but works well considering we're here for the combat. While Warhammer 40k has one of the richest and more confusing story arcs I've tried to follow and comprehend, the vignettes of story they implement in their games are very interesting and set the tone for a gameplay loop that is extremely fun. You'll be terrorizing hordes, and I mean hordes, of Tyranids while preventing them from taking over. Between an arsenal of guns and blades, no Tyranid is a match for you, and it feels great. I actually have an issue with their parry system. It feels a bit janky and not really one of my favorite mechanics of the game, but not enough to deter me from an overall awesome experience. Also, if you haven't gotten the chance, you should check out the Space Marine episode on Secret Level. Thank me later.
One has to ask, them dead, who shall take the throne?
Okay, at number 6, Metaphor ReFantazio. This is likely going to be my most controversial take on this video. A lot of people have this as their game of the year for 2024, not me. I'm someone who loves Atlas. I'm a fan of the Persona games. I've played Personas 3 through 5. I'm waiting for remake versions of 1 and 2. Overall, the way Atlas tells stories and how they tackle tough topics like politics, discrimination, and depression, etc. I don't see another developer that tackles these topics the way Atlas does without it feeling like they're preaching some kind of woke agenda. Atlas manages to weave these topics into their environments and their characters in a way that keeps you immersed in the world and actually caring about their well-being from start to finish. When you add the Sims element to building relationships with the friends you meet, and an engaging combat system, you have a recipe for success that has Atlas, in my opinion, one of the top developers in the game right now. Can I also mention the art design for the UI? Atlas makes going to the menu systems something cool to do. Metaphor handles all of these elements as successfully as you would expect from a Persona title. Engaging characters, an actually interesting main character that actually talks, an interesting overarching theme, and a storyline with a fast-paced and intuitive gameplay system that's fun to play. Some of its shortcomings, however, brought the overall vibe down for me. I think the story felt rushed at times, while the dialogue felt like it was dragging on for much of the story, over-speaking in conversations when it wasn't necessary. Gaining the trust of the people also felt rushed. While completing main and side quests improved your standing with the people, there was a disconnect that didn't feel fully fleshed out. The necessity to push onward through the calendar and having only 2 activities available each day kind of hinders the ability to really get to know the people when you are having to level up and clear content. Switching between archetypes felt weird for much of the game also. I couldn't tell if the game was wanting me to stick with a handful of archetypes to change between, or the way I approached it, using and upgrading as many as I could unlock. Many times it felt like I was underpowered to tackle bosses, and regular battles felt like they took much longer than they needed to. I did like that they would assist in letting you know what classes were most viable for a given mission, but some of those missions had battles that lasted so long I felt like I was doing something wrong. The last thing I'll mention here is that I'm so used to Atlas pulling off little twists and turns in their storylines to keep you guessing throughout the campaign. And in Metaphor, that didn't really happen much. The 2 big twists that happened were interesting, don't get me wrong, but not at the level I'm used to from Atlas, so it felt a bit disappointing. Overall, I love the new venture in Metaphor ReFantazio. It sets the stage well as a growing franchise, and I'm definitely looking forward to a sequel. Persona 3 Reload is 5th on my list here. Persona 3 was originally my first Persona game when it came out on the PS2 as the FES edition, and I was so engaged in the story of students trying to balance the day-to-day of being a high school student while focusing on eradicating evil at night. Atlas weaved an experience so compelling and intriguing while throwing in some really great twists and turns to keep you guessing throughout the adventure. I also want to call out the art design in this game and really Atlas's approach to it. I mean, look at the UI for these menus and the attention to detail. Atlas knows you're going to be spending time navigating these menus, and they took their time crafting and designing a UI that is cohesive to the rest of the game. As a motion graphic artist myself, I get inspired playing Atlas's games and seeing what they come up with from a design and animation perspective. I think they present the best portfolio in the industry regarding UI art direction. It's awe-inspiring. On top of that, to see this game get completely remade with improved visuals and an improved combat system, I didn't need much of a reason to jump back in, but this was so worth it.
Eve, I've been waiting for you. Do you have good news?
I do.
Okay, so Stellar Blade is number 4 on my list. This game initially drew me in because it was a Korean developer I've never heard of with a combat system that reminded me of a Heavenly Sword back on the PS3. The visuals looked amazing and it was extremely cinematic. Now, controversy blew up about this game initially because the main character, Eve, was designed to be very attractive, and we have activists out here writing hit pieces on the game on launch, trying to trash it because to them, it was all about exposing Eve and her assets. Now, when you look at the game for what it is, you really do have an awesome gameplay system here that's fun to play, with lots of skills to learn and vary up the stylish combos. Even the story was very interesting when you get closer to the ending and you start to see how things are coming together. I had a really good time with this game. The game can be pretty tough at times and the replay value is much better than you would think. Not to mention there's a boss rush mode, which is always welcome. And speaking of boss rush modes, I had to put Black Myth Wukong on the number 3 spot. I saw so much footage for this game years before it came out. I couldn't believe a game looked this good and had the kind of gameplay and mechanics and animation style and detail that it had. When this game finally came out, I was sold. It took me a while to really figure out how game science wanted me to approach this game. You have a series of massively open sandbox locations you have to traverse in order to guide Wukong back to his most powerful form. I cannot speak enough about the vistas of this game. They are a marvel by themselves, and I would say that game science utilizes Unreal 5's engine better than any game I've seen to date. A lot of gamers I've seen complain about there not being a map. While I believe a map has been added via a recent patch, I personally think part of the charm that game science was trying to create was that sense of immersion. I was okay with missing some enemy types and bosses here or there. I just wanted to immerse myself in the world and see what it had to offer, and I loved every minute of it. The bosses had so much charm and variation to them. Rarely do you run into duplicate types of bosses and regular enemies that would cheapen the experience. 95% of the bosses were uniquely different and offered something new in combat that I had to learn and figure out, which really felt amazing. I was challenged from start to finish through difficulty on enemies, environmental traversal, and especially combat. Once you got the main skills unlocked for each of your staff stances, you really got to see the potential that each stance brought to combat, and you needed to know when to switch between the different stances on the fly to always capitalize on the situation. Black Myth Wukong has challenged the expectations I hold for action games moving forward in the best way possible, and that's why it sits on my number 3 spot.
For the kingdom of Drakenhold, we shall never fail.
Did you really think we'd let these atrocities go unpunished?
My number 2 game on this list goes to Unicorn Overlord. And to be honest, there were many times that I considered swapping this out to being my game of the year, and in many regards it actually is. First and foremost, I have to give kudos to Vanillaware. They have an art and animation style that is unique to them. With their hand-drawn scripted movements, it's just gorgeous. The story could be considered its weakest aspect, to be honest, because it's not telling a story we haven't heard before, but the way it's told and how we are drawn to have empathy for the many characters you come across is really impressive. There are moments of reflection, trials and tribulation, betrayal, and many others that many of the characters exude throughout the adventure. However, the gameplay is where this game shines, and I still plot ideas in my head of different combat scenarios. Unicorn Overlord is a tactical RPG with an overworld system for traversal. It's a gorgeous sight, and the combat has many deep elements that keep it engaging. You have different classes of characters, from knights to rogues to various mages, and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses to each other that have to be paid attention to. So the bulk of the game is putting teams together in different combinations, upwards of 6 per squad, and finding the right balance to defeat the enemy groups that confront you. When you put the right combinations of members together in a squad, it can produce some amazingly fun and satisfying results. But one squad formation isn't always a good choice for every enemy squad type. You'll be mixing and matching, coming up with different combinations of squads, and sometimes your combinations won't work, and you will constantly find yourself tweaking it. Sometimes they work on some groups and not others. and sometimes you can have a squad run the table for a while and then fall off all of a sudden to some new enemy types that force you to re-strategize. It's a system that never gets stale, and it never gets boring. At every turn, the game is challenging you to rise your squads above the competition, and the process of doing that through an over 70-hour playthrough felt so good, I didn't want it to end. In fact, my only gripe with the game is that when you're done with all the content the game offers you, that's it. There's no New Game Plus, you can't carry any of your progress over in any way, and I think a New Game Plus with all of your gear carried over to a harder difficulty mode would have made it a complete package deliverable. This came out at a perfect time for me, and I will always count it as one of the best games I've ever played.
We are to bear witness to the reunion of worlds, for the future is bright.
And sitting at the #1 spot, my personal game of the year goes to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think the thought that goes through my head when deciding this game over Unicorn Overlord ultimately was decided based on nostalgia. Something Unicorn Overlord couldn't deliver on. I've been a Final Fantasy head since I was little, and while I have love for many of these games, and I can also share criticisms for a lot of these games, Final Fantasy VII was my very first Final Fantasy, and I was drawn to this game in such a strong way. I mean, OG Final Fantasy VII is the reason I love RPGs and JRPGs so much. So when the rumors finally landed and the initial trailers for Final Fantasy VII Remake started coming out, man, I was so ready. Remembering the polygon visuals of the PS1 to getting a fully realized take on my favorite cast of characters being made with Unreal Engine 4, it was everything I was hoping it would be. Furthermore, when I realized that Square Enix is retelling the story of Final Fantasy VII the way it has, made me look at Square in a different light. The way they're telling this story is so meta, I don't know how this idea of storytelling hasn't been implemented more. It's so clever, and the fact that they broke the game up into a trilogy really gives them the opportunity to truly flesh out this adventure out in the best way possible. Rebirth has shown that in spades. While Final Fantasy VII Remake would serve as the appetizer of the trilogy, Rebirth would act as the main course, and there's so much meat on this bone. It is an open-world amusement park of adventure and combat, charismatic characters, an engaging storyline that manages to add new twists to a story we are already supposed to be familiar with. The side quests are so jam-packed it actually gets exhausting after a while. There are side quests everywhere, and most of it is good. Even better, the side quests largely tie into the overall story in various ways, so it only enhances the experience of the game when you do them. I think the best way to play this game for the first time is really just to do as much of everything as you possibly can. You won't regret it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a full experience that some would say over-delivers on the content, but when you realize that you don't have to do any of the side content, you can just beeline the story, it's really hard to criticize Rebirth in any way. Combat is so smooth and it's so engaging, exploration is a delight, and it's very rewarding. The visuals are so good looking, especially on PS5 Pro or on the PC. In terms of audio and music, this has to have been the best score to a game I've played in a generation. No lie. Remasters to a lot of the songs that hit in the original back in 1997, like One Winged Angel, are even better now than before. The developers care about this game. It oozes nostalgia, mixed with fresh ideas, takes and renditions on old ideas, and enhancing them to hit you in new and amazing ways. Square Enix has redefined what it means to remake a game in a special way. And while they threw everything at Rebirth to make this an experience we would never forget, there is still the final piece to the trilogy that is yet to drop. And I have all the confidence in the world that Square Enix won't disappoint. Please give yourself the opportunity to check this out if you are into adventures like this. It's a special experience whether you're familiar with it or you're a newcomer. And that wraps up my list of favorites for 2024. I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well, and what ones you thought were worthy that didn't make this list. Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.